Hello and welcome to the Good Life Guys show podcast. I'm Yasin and I'm here with Steven and
Sh- Sven.
Sven. And I was just watching a bunch of YouTube videos this morning. And
As you do.
and you know what? It was guilt-free for the first time in a long time and it felt fucking amazing.
Wow, great.
Um
It's
I've been
beautiful, man.
I've been really like trying to be more decisive with what I do, you know? Uh
Today I'm going to sit at home all day masturbating.
yeah,
I will
exactly.
eat I will eat 20 donuts and take a lot of drugs.
If you're gonna do it, you might as well do it
Yeah,
decisively.
exactly. I'm going all out today.
Yeah. Um, did the same last night. Not YouTube videos, but I was just like, I'm just gonna fucking do XYZ. I'm gonna play chess and then I'm gonna drink over a bottle of wine and lose all the chess because I drank over a bottle of wine.
Beautiful.
And
Was
just
that online chess
no,
or
it was with my housemate.
okay, cool.
So we have a bit of a grudge match. We're pretty close in skill. I'd say I'm slightly better right now.
Hmm.
As soon as I started drinking, it was just loss after loss.
Oh wow.
Um,
Would you rather playing someone who's slightly better than you or someone who you're slightly better than?
s- I would say as long as it's not off-putting, the better they are, the better it is.
Yeah.
You know, it comes a point where you're just like, I'm just gonna stop playing. Like I used to play Scrabble, and I fancied myself pretty good online. This was at the start of lockdown. I started getting pretty addicted, as I do with anything that I start and like. And then there was this guy who was just so good, and I got obsessed with playing him and, like, going, "Yeah, I'm gonna beat him." And then when I realized I never would, I just stopped playing the game altogether.
Are we overusing the word addicted or addiction, do you think? Because, like, if you're talking about Scrabble, it could just be that you, when you get into something, for the period of time you're into it, just want to do it most of the time and can't really think of anything else that you would rather do. I mean, is that really an addiction? Arguably not.
Yeah, mate, that's a good point. That is a good point.
Did you just call
I
me
think
mate? Did you say, yeah, mate? That's a good point.
no.
All right, because I thought that's the least Yasin thing I've ever heard.
Sometimes I try and say, "Yeah, mate," and it just sounds so foreign. It's like I'm speaking Portuguese or something.
Yeah, you used the word man, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Me too. Dude. Yeah, you said dude a bit. Yeah, you said dude. Yeah.
Uh,
You said
some
dude in text messages.
do I?
Yes. But you
Dude.
say man in real life.
Ah. Yeah, there's some things that it
Oh, you
depends on
said
the context.
sorry, it's just occurred to me. You say brother a lot as well.
Yeah, I like Brother. That's my
Yeah.
favorite one. It's like the most I save that for people I really like. I don't
Hmm.
just go around willy-nilly, but I think people willy-nilly say like man and mate and
Yeah, yeah. If you
so
say
my
brother to someone you don't really know, that can sound a bit like contrived. But if you say it to
yeah,
someone that you know and are fond of, that I think it's a nice one. I agree. Yeah,
yeah.
my favorite too.
My two least favorite are buddy and pal. Hate them. I think you use one of those sometimes, and I know it's not intended in the way that I perceive it with other people. But if a stranger calls me a buddy or a pal, I get really annoyed.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah, I feel that way about pal, less so about buddy. I think buddy's kind of okay, but pal, there's something like very throwaway about pal. Like the people I can think of offhand to call me pal, I don't think that like we have a very good relationship. Like I
yeah,
don't think that we're really pals actually, and I think it's like it's just like yeah, yeah, whatever, pal. Like that. It sounds almost like derogatory.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's how I feel about both of them. They're like, I'd call, if a 3-year-old was like, "Guess how old I am?" I'd be like, "Go on, tell me, pal. How old are you?
Mm.
Tell me, little buddy." Um, so
Yeah.
that's why. Anyway, so I'm watching these YouTube videos, and it was just like hit after hit for some reason. Um, and one of them was talking about I don't know who this woman is, and I don't think I'll ever watch her again. But this nugget that was in the content was really, really cool, and it's one for them, one for you. And she was basically talking about how she had a YouTube channel and she was working for Adobe. Um, and she was like throwing herself fully into her work at Adobe, and then only very rarely catching herself and going, "Fuck, I'm not working on my own stuff." Um, and so she came up with this philosophy of every time I do whatever, 10 hours for them, I do 10 hours for myself.
Jesus, man, that could
And
snowball into a fucking ton of
yeah,
work.
yes. So the point here that I took from it was not, and it's not what she meant, but the point for me is that basically this means that you have to put yourself first and you can't forget yourself in someone else's goal, in someone else's work, right?
Hmm.
um, because th- their aim is not to look after you as their primary, that's not their primary aim at the very least. Their
Mm.
primary aim is to reach their goal, and you are a tool to help them reach the goal, and one of many tools if it's a big company.
Yeah.
um, so I think often we can fool ourselves into thinking my employer cares about me.
Mm.
Which I mean, been burned by this. I know lots of people have, and not even in extreme ways like I have, but you know, they're just in need. You know, their mum's sick or something, and they're like, "I just need a little bit more time off work than you've allocated me for the year." And they're like, "Yeah, sweet. You have a long, long holiday now because you're not working here."
Yeah.
Um, and there's loads of examples like that, and or just people as soon as they're struggling a bit or the business isn't doing as well as possible, they'll just, it doesn't matter what you've done in the past for them
Yeah.
because their primary goal is to grow the business.
I've always thought a striking example of this is in professional sports, and my favorite sport being soccer, football. Like, it's just like always kind of like stood out to me when you've got a team, let's say in the championship, which is the second tier, yeah, of English league football, and they're like fighting to get promoted to the Premier League, which is the top tier, and that's a brilliant thing to happen to the club. The club's going to get a massive cash injection. They're going to be playing against the top teams in the world. But for a good solid number of their squad, yeah, and even the guys who are really important playing in the first 11, getting promoted is almost a guarantee that they're not going to be playing for the team anymore. Because once the team gets promoted, which is what they want, if they're like a kind of a, you know, like a lifelong, let's say, lower leagues player, but they just happen to be doing well, and you know, let's say they're a real good fighter and a good pro, but they're not absolutely elite, then they'll probably be replaced when they get promoted. So I've
Mhm.
always thought, like, in a way, you know, promotion must be a double-edged sword in that regard. And yeah, like, you know, a football team is a good example of a company that fundamentally cares, you know, only about its own success.
Yeah, and you know, it's not always as clear cut as it might sound now. You might think, "Ah, that's wrong. My company, you know, they give me free croissants on a Monday."
Mm.
Um, but that's like, you know, a thinly veiled illusion. Um, the truth is they do that so that you stick around, and uh, if no other company did it, they probably wouldn't do it too. It's like uh, now we're becoming more employee centric, or at least once again providing this mirage of employee care and consideration.
Hmm.
And so everyone has to now give the croissants and the free coffee and uh, you know, Tuesday drinks and that kind of thing. But ultimately, they still want you to work 10 to 12 hours a day. They don't want you to take any, like, for example, um, my company gives you 5 days sick pay, sick paid sick leave per year. That to me is insane.
Mm.
Um,
Is that like less than normal? I don't know.
I don't know either. It was the same at GoDaddy as well. So I don't know what is normal, but I just think uh, it's not enough.
Mm,
Um, but, I'm not trying to get into the ethics or anything of that. I'm just saying that there's 365 days in a year, and you're expected to be sick less than 5 of them and still give absolutely everything you have to
yeah.
the company. Um,
I mean, it does bring us back to like the old, uh, well, topic we've covered a lot of times, but it just seems like, is there such a thing as a completely selfless act? I can't see how such a thing could exist. I've never seen an act that seemed like a completely selfless act. I don't know. I genuinely just don't know the answer to that question. I mean, I could. The best way to do it probably is to look within yourself, because you can never really tell a person's motivation by just looking at their behavior, because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes of their mind. But when I look at myself, when I've done things that feel like maybe they're selfless, like it's quite easy to detect that feeling, that act makes me feel good as well.
mm, yeah, absolutely. And I don't think the point we're trying to make here is that companies and corporations are evil and la la la. It's not that. It's just you have to look out for yourself in the same way that these companies and corporations are doing for themselves.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
that's all it really is, and not get sold by that lie of we care about you. Um,
Yeah,
because
yeah. They don't care about you, and that's completely reasonable and fine.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
they shouldn't care about you. It's unrealistic to expect them to care about you. There isn't any companies out there that like truly deeply care about you. As you said, they care about you to the extent that their company does well,
Mm,
which is the best way to be. Like, why would
yeah,
you expect them to be otherwise? It's unrealistic.
yeah. But imagine you are entering into a relationship with them, a long-term relationship. Imagine in any other instance of a long-term relationship where you say, "Ah, yeah, I give my all to this one person, and they just don't care about me, and
Mm.
I'm just going to keep doing it." And I hope that if I give even more and I sleep less and I forego eating, so I can give even more to them, that they'll eventually love me as I love them.
But hold on. Surely the reason in the vast majority of cases that an employee is giving their all to the company, etc., is actually because they want to get ahead. It's not because they love the company in some kind of uh, you know heartfelt way. Like it is ultimately because they see gain down the road from it. Like, why do you do 12-hour days? Is it because you think you will gain something from it, like a pay increase or a promotion or
Yeah, for sure, but there's definitely people, even within my company, that don't do that.
but they must believe that they're going to get some payoff. And maybe the payoff for certain individuals is like, oh, I won't get given out to by my boss, or people will like me, or some kind of indirect, harder to find payoff. But do you think people do things just out of the goodness of their heart for their
Not the
company?
goodness of their heart, but in the same way that even relationships are selfish. You might have a sexual relationship and, um, you're in it for yourself, but you also are in it because you like or really fancy the person,
Mm,
and I think that happens relatively frequently as well. There's a lot of mercenaries for sure, and probably more and more, but there's also a lot of people within my company, within the previous company. My experience has been that there's people that love what they do, and they love the company they do it for, and they're quite loyal. But
but
yeah,
is it ever like all one way? Like, surely those people also want to get things from the company. Like, surely it's not like mutually exclusive. You could like really love the company, but do you think that there's, for example, anyone who puts the company before themselves?
yeah, for sure. I've seen people's health deteriorate because they
But
don't sleep and they
surely
don't.
that's because they think they'll get a payoff, don't they? You don't think so?
No, for sure. I just think that it's more complex than a one. variable thing, but I've just seen that people get in the same way that you go to football matches and you see people like fighting each other or getting angry because someone's an Arsenal fan instead of a
Mm,
Manchester fan, and you're like, this is insane. But that's the power of the group,
mm,
of the tribe, and so
yeah.
these companies create this illusory tribe status for themselves and the people within it. And so people work insane hours when they may not see the payoff, and they don't see the payoff for a long time, and they continue to do it because of that. Um,
I guess it's not illusory though. Like it actually is a legit tribe because a tribe can be is a group of people that um, is brought together by some idea, and it doesn't really matter what the idea is. It could be blood or genetics or a football team name or
yeah, yeah,
anything. I mean, there's the famous what's the famous experiment where like is it like the stand is it the stand I don't know, one of these experiments you read about in like way too many books, that one of the really famous experiments that when you start reading about it you're like, oh, this fuck, they're gonna like detail this for 3 pages, shit. But it's the one where like they had like prison officers and prisoners. I think it's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Stanford or something like that. But then they, yeah, like, but they were all strangers, but they all like immediately like became viciously for their team and like
Yeah, yeah.
extremely brutal against their opposition.
Yeah, it's superhuman. Um, super pause human. Um, yeah, so I think you're right. I think it's probably not illusory. Just I think maybe what I'm trying to say is to some degree, if they really looked beneath the surface, they'd see it's meaningless or that
Mm.
it's contrived. Um,
Agreed, man. And you could say that about so many tribes. I mean, what this is making me think about is like an almost bigger issue of like, don't um, get sucked into like tribes and in your own mind think that you're a part of something and kind of maybe compromise your own integrity and who you are for a tribe or a group that I don't know, you're like mistakenly thinking has your back in a sense.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, but yeah, to bring it back to this one for me, one for them mentality, I think it's not just about working on your own project. It doesn't, as we've spoken about before, this hustle culture is just so boring and it's so unhealthy. And I was watching Dana White. So you know how people make these like motivational videos and there's the like orchestral music and
Mm-hmm.
then people running and sweating and
Mm-hmm.
pushing tires and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have a famous person speaking over it. This time it was Dana White and he's like, sleep. I fucking hate sleep. Um, and that sounds ridiculous, but but that's, like, almost word for word what he said. He's like, "I had insomnia, like, really bad insomnia, and I loved it."
Yeah, yeah.
And,
The
and I was
mistake
just
we
like,
make is we think that when somebody's materially successful, we assume that they must be happy. But I think it's probably in short, in fact, it's probably certain that like there are loads of people who are highly materialistically successful who are uh and this is not because of their success, but it's just like the human condition can be a painful condition. Like if you're not sleeping, you're working constantly, you're going to be feeling quite bad a lot of the time.
mhm,
It's almost like guaranteed.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we want to know how to find success, we're probably best off looking at people like Dana White or whatever, even though on the other hand, not really, because they don't really know how they got there. Um, they
Yeah.
very rarely acknowledge their genetics, their environment, the happenstance, all of these things. They're like, "Man, I hustled and I made it happen." And it's like, "Nah, did you though?"
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah. It appears like that to you, but you don't really see how close you are to not making anything happen and how much of a factor luck was in it.
yeah, completely agree. Um, but it's we're not just talking about that, about hustle culture. Um, She was saying, "Yeah, do 10 hours for them and then 10 hours for you and then 10 hours for them," and as you said, that sounds like a lot of fucking work. But it doesn't just have to be that. I think it also has to be, okay, you're giving a certain amount of your health, physical and mental, to these people as well. We all know it's not good to sit in a chair for 10 hours a day. Um,
Hmm.
so if you're investing a certain amount of time into this company that have their own agenda and are not working for your betterment really, then what are you doing for yourself? Um, and how do you balance that out? So how do you make sure you get enough sleep and eat well enough and exercise and don't bend on those things? I think that's the important thing. It's very easy to let work fill every free hour of the day. You know, to start out working 9 till 6 and then go 9 till 8 and then 7 till 8, keep pushing it, and then it's eating into your sleep, it's eating into your social time. So how are you making time for things outside of work that matter to you, that will actually improve your life, um, in a long-term way? Because ultimately, working for a company, it's a transitory thing. They can decide at any minute they don't want you, and what you've built for the company will stay in the form of the company, but you won't continue to be rewarded for those things. Whereas investments into your health and social circle and a side project, if you want to do that, will continue to pay dividends over time. Um, so that's the general philosophy I got from that, and I thought it was pretty cool. Just a reminder to prioritize yourself because no one else is going to do that.
Hmm. I've always kind of approached the whole financial independence thing, which we've mentioned on the podcast many times before, kind of from that perspective. It's like if I'm working and I'm uh giving of myself, giving energy, giving time that I'll never get back, etc., to a job, I need to be building something from, like, I need to be building like my own little castle, as it were, from what I'm getting from my employer. Yeah, like if you're getting paid to do work that is, tiring you out and taking your energy and your time, which essentially all work does, uh, then I think you need to be like looking out for yourself all the while, kind of building, in a sense, your own kind of freedom fund, as it were. So you're not completely reliant on your employer, let's say 10 years down the road from
Yeah.
today. And if you're just spending all of your money and not really building a little kind of a, or whatever size, like, wealth fund, then you're never building that kind of potential to not need your employer anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've only realized that this year is that is if not then one of the primary ways to create some distance between you and the people that give you money, uh,
Mm.
to make it less of a necessity. And I think that when it becomes less of a necessity, you work differently.
Oh yeah.
The relationship changes. So previously, when I was desperate for cash, and if these people didn't give me the cash, I would have no cash, and I, could end up homeless. When that was the power dynamic, I worked all the time, and I was constantly scared,
Hmm.
constantly. Like I'd work 14 hours and be like, "Fuck, they're gonna fire me because I didn't work 16 hours." And I would sacrifice things I didn't want to sacrifice, like health, like working out, like sleep, these kinds of things.
Hmm.
And it was only when I was able to save uh, 10K or so that I felt like, okay, if I get fired for whatever reason, I'm still good for like a while. I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And that makes you reconsider the relationship. Just the same way as when we used to talk a lot about dating and stuff. It's like if you want a healthy power dynamic, you have to know that you can find someone else. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean you have to constantly be looking for someone else. If you want a long-term relationship, that's great. But even within a long-term relationship, you have to know that you could get someone of equal caliber, whatever that even means, um, or you're gonna be mistreated. Uh,
Basically, being like needful, and need, I suppose, is different to, yeah, need is different to a preference. Like
mhm,
I can prefer to stay, let's say, with my partner, or to get like a date with somebody I'm attracted to, or to stay in my job. But if I and I can prefer to get paid this month, yeah. But if I need any of those things, it's a much more precarious situation to be in, and a much more stressful situation to be in. Like fucking needing money, needing
yeah,
your next paycheck is a horrible place to be. And the funny thing is as well, it's also okay. Look, you can need your next paycheck because your circumstances are such that you live paycheck to paycheck. But you can also need your next paycheck because you have a mindset that is something along the lines of "I can never have enough." Yeah, so you
yeah,
could be. I mean, and we've talked about this from a investing perspective. It's like, in a way, and I think this probably happens. Surely this happens to loads of people. Yeah, the richer you get, the more you begin to think about money, and the more obsessed with money you get. And I watch a lot of well, I don't anymore, but I have watched many podcasts and listened to YouTube videos and whatnot about investing. And the people who are the most into investing are probably some of the most financially secure people in the world, and they're more obsessed with money than the average. Very
mhm.
much so. So yeah, you can be really needful of money in a way that is stressful and anxiety provoking, because your circumstances require it, or because your mindset is just kind of never enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think these two things need to be worked on in tandem. So you need to find a degree of financial freedom. I think for most of us, that is the fastest way to being able to breathe and to make choices based on what we want rather than what we need.
Mm,
Um, I'm sure there's some people that are just fucking stoic as fuck, and you know they'll just do what they want regardless. But for most of us, that's not a reality. We have to do things based on what will put food on the table and stuff like that. And in order to move away from that, we have to find some level of financial freedom, or get extremely lucky. And I would rather bet on working diligently on getting financial freedom than hoping I win the lottery, uh, metaphorically. So, the
mhm,
podcast blowing up or whatever else.
mhm,
Um, but I remember back in the day, I a friend of mine, Aaron, he was like, I'm leaving a bit late because the cleaner was late getting here, and I had no money, and I was like, "Can you fire her and I'll be your cleaner?" And I just like I didn't want to do it. I really didn't want to do it, but
mhm,
back in that day, I was doing all sorts of jobs that I really didn't want to do.
mm,
Um, and I'm not going to mention a name now because I think they'll get offended by this, but there's someone, a friend of mine who is now going through a similar thing where they're being like very fussy with the work that they choose on one end. They're like, "Oh, I can only get this kind of work." But then on the other side, they're being quite poor with their money and don't seem to realize that they're actually pushing themselves more and more toward the you now don't have a choice. A choice about what kind of work you do, and then the relationship between you and the employer when you are working. And it's a terrible, terrible place to be. For instance, they got some money for Christmas. Um, we'll say it was £100, and they went out and spent it on clothes, and they have no money. And then they're like, "I'm not gonna." They're complaining that they can't get the work that they want, and that it's looking more and more likely that they have to get any job. And these kinds of ways of acting and thinking are exactly what I used to do. And I don't know why I used to think like that, but it keeps you down when you make these stupid choices and you don't prioritize financial freedom, because there's this idea that it's capitalist and capitalism's ugly and evil, and I bought into that because I wasn't doing well. And when you start thinking like that, you want nothing to do with money, and so money has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like money is, like it or not, essential in the modern world. And if you see it in a way that's kind of loaded with weird beliefs and emotion, then it will always probably be a source of stress to, at least, in some way, shape, or form. But if you just see it as a completely impersonal tool, which is what it is, then you can just kind of like be very cold and unemotional about it, and kind of, organize it like you would organize any other tool.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you organize tools? Yeah, of course you organize tools. What am I
Yeah.
talking about? Yeah.
It's so easy to fall into this because the world in which we live in is, I'm not going to say cushy because it's dependent on an individual's experience, but on average, it's far more cushy than it's ever been. Like, we live in
Mm-hmm.
a relatively soft world. This idea that people can say, "I want to talk into a microphone and get paid lots of money," and it can actually happen, is an insane thing. To think that people can make a living that isn't brutally difficult.
Oh yeah.
Um, and so when I was younger, I used to think, no, no, I will make it as an artist, some sort of creative, podcasting, music, whatever. And I will not sell out, and get a
Mm-hmm.
normal job. Um, and it's a very romantic idea. It's rose tinted glasses. The struggling, starving artist is something that is a common trope that has great appeal to a great many people. Um, but I think for the vast majority of us, all it does is create pain, because we are like Peter Pan, just denying reality. And the reality is the world's still pretty tough. Um, it's just that the people that do well, we see them doing well because they're on social media and YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. So we think, oh, I'll do that
Mm.
instead. Um,
Yeah. Football's a
so
great example of this. Like, 'cause I've been playing a lot of
yeah,
amateur football over the last couple of weeks, and it's like, my God, there are guys playing like in London on 5, 6, 7-a-side pitches who are fucking quality players. Like, and absolutely no hope of getting anywhere near becoming an actual, like, legit, having a professional career at it. It's just the pyramid is just so unbelievably big, and it's so much bigger than anyone kind of really realizes. It's so much bigger than any kind of young person who wants to be a professional footballer realizes. It's just, the competition is just fucking, is essentially never ending, and rising to the top of that mountain is just, for all intents and purposes, it's not actually impossible, but it's kind of it's much nearer to impossible than it is to probable, if that makes
mhm,
any sense.
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, I guess like most of life is like that. It's so easy to look, like, for example, read The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss and go, oh yeah, like, look at Tim Ferriss did it, I'll do it. It's like Tim Ferriss is one of literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not of thousands, if not millions of Tim Ferrisses who are out there doing what he does. And all of the rest of them have absolutely made no money at it, and probably have probably actually, spent money on it overall.
mhm,
And Tim probably thinks that he is where he is because he's just like worked hard and is great at it. And so he gives that advice, and it's like, no, you don't see that life is essentially, is highly, highly, highly randomized
mhm.
and filled by randomness. Nassim Taleb was the book that really first kind of opened my eyes to this notion of just being the completely random nature of life, like,
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, even the ability to work hard is is completely random.
Yeah.
So when the more I understand this, the funnier and funnier it becomes when they're like, "Yeah, you need to work 18 hours a day." Okay,
Mm,
how?
yeah.
How do I do that? Because I can't do that.
Well, like I now think about it like your work ethic, and work ethic is just one example of like a process that we think is in our control, like your thoughts, your motivation, your um, desires and like preferences, like the stuff that's created by your mind, right, is as outside of your control as your digestive juices are. Like if you eat something, you don't make your stomach digest it. And in the same way, you have the work ethic you fucking have. And it isn't something that you can like, oh, no, I'm going to make myself have more work ethic. Although it does appear that way because sometimes you can force yourself to work. But it's an illusion that you forced yourself to work. You just worked and it felt like you forced yourself to do it. And then on the other day when you didn't do it, you just happened to not do it, you
Yeah.
know?
The way I always like to bring it back to physical displays of uniqueness, um, because people understand that more. The brain, I still think, is incredibly mythical and magical to people. They just think it acts in this very unique, spiritual, magical way. But with the body, they're like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like you can talk about so many different things. People say there's no difference in intelligence between men and women or between any individual. Intelligence is this thing, you can just get it. I had a friend who told me she could be smarter than Jeff Bezos and have more money than him if she just worked hard. And I was like, "But could you be faster than Usain Bolt?" And she's like, "No." And I'm like, "Oh, you do realize the brain is just another part of the body?" She's like,
Mm.
"No, because I can try hard." And I'm like, "Yeah, but you do realize that how hard you try it is decided for you, you know?"
Yeah, beautifully put. Yeah.
And the scary way, when you think like this, and I think I've said this before, but when you start thinking that you control everything in your reality except for your physical prowess, it's very dangerous because then you start thinking homeless people are there because they're lazy bastards,
Mm.
and just if they worked harder, um, and
Laziness isn't laziness has a bad rep or a bad it's a bad word, but like it struck me a long time ago at school, like because when I see teachers like berating children for things like not having done their homework or not paying attention in class, it's like you you are you're acting as if laziness is a choice. But I
mm,
mean, we've all had the feeling of like lying on our bed after a day's work, going, I know I should do that thing that I keep putting off, but I can't. It's just
yeah,
I'm lazy now. Like I wish I wasn't,
yeah,
but I'm feeling lazy. It's just a thing that like a kid would rather have their homework done when they get to class. But unfortunately, they were lazy.
mm. And that's the sad reality of the world we live in, is that you can't say that stuff. Imagine saying that to your employer, like, "Where's the document? We need to hand it into HR by 2 to." I didn't want to do it.
And I just couldn't make
Yeah,
myself.
yeah. Or no, I really wanted to. Oh man, those
Yeah,
videos on YouTube were so enticing.
yeah.
So
You know how it is. And he's like, yeah, I know how it is. That'd be the great boss.
yeah, um, but I mean, and it sounds ridiculous that can't be the way it is, but that would be the most honest, true way of living our lives, is that the people that are productive are left to be productive, and
Mhm.
the people that just aren't, or are less so because it's a spectrum, right? They're not just left on the streets. It shouldn't be like this binary, like you either have this innate thing or you're going to be ostracized from society.
But also remember that our level of, let's say, productivity, right? In some, because productivity is way too vague, right? Like, so nobody's just like productive. and nobody's unproductive because it's completely vague, right? So it's
Yeah,
all completely situationally dependent. I'm productive in certain ways and I'm completely unproductive in other ways. Yeah. But nobody's level of productivity, even at a given task, is like set. It's completely situationally dependent. So if you can get away with being lazy, like if I can get away with being lazy, I'll be as lazy as I am in that moment. But if, because there's this massive pressure on, that has fundamentally changed the moment. And so maybe if somebody has a gun to my head and they're saying do that job you've been putting off, then I'll find the ability to get up and go and do it. You know, so it is completely situational dependent in that regard. So I would say just kind of, when you're saying that the unproductive people in society should just be like left to be unproductive, but if somebody's unproductive long enough and then they have like no money at all, then I think that will be the impetus to be less unproductive than they're currently being. And then when they get comfortable, they may become unproductive again because they're like, oh, I've got enough now, so that's fine. Now I can kind of be unproductive again.
yeah. No, I mean, it is more complex than I'm making it out to be. You know, if you just give people money, is that a good thing? Is really hard to say. Universal credit seems to, or universal income seems to not work. Um,
I can't see how it wouldn't be, like provoke people to just sit around and do fuck all. Like
mm,
it just, it has to. Like, not with everyone, obviously. Some people will go and feverishly work on their art or their passion, but huge swathes of society will just chill the fuck out and do nothing if they get free money.
yeah, which I think that aspect of it I'm okay with.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, you know, it just
the
is what it is.
the issue I see is that it might lead to, you know, people devolving to, you know, I when I see people that live on the dole for a long time and live in council estates, as I did when I was growing up, they start over time. They seem to like to morph. You know, there's no like light behind the eyes anymore.
Couldn't you say that about someone who's worked in any number of, like, you know, in air quotation, soul destroying or whatever type jobs? You know, I'm not
Yeah, yeah, maybe.
being derogatory to any job, but like, I mean, you know, for example, I'm a teacher and I love being a teacher, but I see loads of teachers who are cynical and bullying children
Yeah, yeah,
constantly,
yeah.
and they're just, you know, like, I
Absolutely.
mean, I don't think that those people are like adding a massive amount of value to the world. I think they're just they're a bit dead behind the eyes too, you know.
Yeah, yeah. It's a different breed of dead behind the eyes, but yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I'm sure there's no easy answer, or we would have figured it out. But it does seem unusual that we require the same thing from everyone. And I've seen
Mm.
it in the workplace. I've seen people that are just really not productive. They're just not. But they're like charismatic and sometimes not even that. They're just good at lying. Um,
Mm.
and they just don't do anything. And they're paid like a huge amount of money. And it's not beneficial for the employer to have people like that. And if as a society we supported these people with like, you know, a lot less money than they would get in these high flying jobs, just give them enough to survive, then they won't need to go around being like, yeah, yeah, I would have got it to you, but the signal in the internet tower was, you know, that kind of
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
uh,
I would have got it to you, but I'm really not cut out on a basic fundamental level to wear this suit and sit in this stuffy office in front of a screen and type absolutely meaningless shit into the computer, because in the state of nature I would have been out hunting
mhm,
and I would have been fucking class at it.
yeah, and that
But
was
in the modern world, I'm forced into these kind of this scenario that just doesn't suit me.
mm,
I'm not
and
saying that's everyone, but that's like presumably quite a few people. You know?
yeah, that is the thing. It's like Um, I'm sure that in the past there would have been one or two hunters that were like, we have to get more meat," and everyone's like, "Man, we've got more than enough meat, and you keep bringing home all this meat, and then it rots." And then they're like, "Yeah, well, I'll build some more huts." It's like, man, we got 20 empty huts. Like, just chill
Mm.
out.
We all just want to sleep and
Yeah, yeah,
take some strange, lick some toads.
yeah, exactly,
And they're like, no, 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 no,
exactly.
sleep's for losers. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
man.
And now it's like those people are thriving, but I think there should be. I don't know how this happens, but space for both of these types of people. And as we said before, it's not two types of people; it's a spectrum. But for simplicity, there should be space for both of these types of people because ultimately, for most of our history, we would have worked a couple of hours a day maximum and then just chilled out. And
Yeah,
what is wrong with that? What is wrong with that?
for sure, man. Listen, I had a I can only really speak from my own perspective, but when I this week got my exam results from school for like my students who did exams, and they all did really well, yeah, and that was a success, right? A career like job, very objective like success for me, yeah, and so I'm successful, right? Like in that way, I'm successful, right? But am I happy? Now, actually, I am happy, right? But was I happy with and because of my success? Not really. Like as soon as I got the results, which I'd been kind of tense about for the last number of weeks and even months, I immediately just went, "Oh, cool!" And then it was totally gone. And I was thinking, "Oh, I got to now. Now the next set of exams are in a couple of weeks. Now I have to work towards them and equal the success." So from that, I just assume that loads of people who we are referring to as being successful, like they must be happy, are not happy, man. Like the reason I by the way, like to achieve those exam results, I put in a lot of extra hours. Like I worked just extra days. I went into work and like really helped my students and ground it out. Yeah. Uh, and why was I doing that? Now, I don't really know the answer to why I did that, but there's definitely some element of me being like ego invested in the result, of me being fearful that if I don't perform well, I am fundamentally not good enough. Um, Even a fear of being not good enough at my job, like fuck, maybe a bit of imposter syndrome, all that shit, all that stuff, which isn't really conducive to happiness, was motivating me. Now, there's also a motivation that, I love my students and I want them to do well. And I just, want to do well at my job and all this stuff. But it's definitely a big mishmash of motivators for why I achieved what was on the surface just a kind of a success, like an undiluted success. But it wasn't all achieved because I'm just some completely happy, well put together like human being. A
Yeah.
lot of it was driven by suffering.
Amen. I actually have to go. Um,
Okay, so on that bombshell,
yeah, I think that's a great way to end with a thought piece. Chew on that, and then let us know what you think. Um, Peace.